All right, good morning, everybody. Wrong way with my camera. There. All right, good morning. My name is Samantha Miraval with Malcolm's application team, and we're doing our design shop talk today to see what questions you might have, see what we can get answered. Didn't have a ton of ones sent in ahead of time, so if you have any, please type them in on the chat. We're live on both Facebook and YouTube. And if you type them in, you'll see me looking off to the side. I can see the chats as they come up over there on my other monitor. So let me make sure both platforms are up. There's YouTube, there's Facebook. So I think we are good to go. Awesome. And yeah. All right. So let's see. What do we have? I want help creating a puff letter with an outline and a font not in DesignShop. You tried create the puff style, and that worked for the sides, but didn't create dense stitches on the top, which is correct. So, okay. And you also want to put an outline on it. All right. So let's take a look at that. That one's kind of a, oops, I'm opening the wrong version. One moment. Sorry. I have multiple versions on this computer, and that's not helpful. Good afternoon, Elaine. Apache Junction in Arizona. Well, thanks for joining today. Glad you caught me live. Let me know if you have any questions. All right, so let's go find Dropbox, Melco, DesignShop Talk, that one. So there. All right, so creating puff. So what you've said you did is, I'm gonna go grab a font. I just picked this American Horror Story, and let's say I draw a G, right? And let's take, because that's a true type font, and let's make it 2.1 tall. All right, and zoom in on it. So I can take this thing and come over here to the styles, which you've already figured out, and say puff alphabets, apply to that selection, apply. And now I've got a gazillion needle penetrations along the sides of this element, but here I don't have any on this edge and this edge. And that's because if you notice, it's a column going back and forth. So it's not going to create stitches underneath here. You have to digitize those yourself. All right. So how do we do that? All right. So I've got this thing. I've already done it below, but let's just do it again. So if I'm going to create this for puff, right now it's got no underlay. So if I draw it, it's going to go straight into sewing. That's not really ideal, right? Because we need to hold the puff down. All right, so what I'm going to do is copy and paste. Let's make it another color so you can keep track of, let me hide that. All right, so I'm going to take this thing, copy and paste. Do I want two on top of each other? No, I'm doing this for another reason. All right, so I'm going to convert this thing over into a complex fill. And I'm just going to replace it. Again, I'm just using this only so I can do this offset outline and do a -10. Okay. All right. What did I just do that for? I can now click on, again, change element from one type to another and change it over to a walk normal, and again, replace it. All right. I'm going to leave it stacked like this just so we can see it, and then I'll move it in a minute. All right. So what is that going to do? I'm actually going to sew that first to hold the puff down. All right, but now I need to cap these ends. Otherwise, as you've already seen, you're not going to have needle penetrations along there, and you'll have puff hanging out, because what's actually cutting the puff is all those stitches back and forth, right? So I've got my walk. Now I'm going to split it at selected points. So I want to split it there, and oops, I didn't want to add a point. Undo that. I'm going to select that guy and say split element at selected points. All right. So I've got a walk that starts here, goes all the way around. That kind of holds it. And then I've got another walk that goes there. So after this walk, let's go ahead and cap that end. So I'm going to create a column like that. Okay, and again, I can take this thing, go into the properties, and apply that puff alphabet thing. All right, so what will that do? Right, so this is going to allow me to have all those needle penetrations underneath that are going to end up cutting that foam along that edge. Okay, so just remember I'm going to rearrange this. So I'm kind of thinking ahead. My walk ends here. This guy, I want to start near that, and I want to end there because now I want to pick up this walk stitch to come up here. So it's going to go finish traipsing down. And now I need to do the same thing over here. I need to cap this. So again, I'm going to draw a shape and apply my properties, styles, apply. And then I can move it around if I need to, since I was just eyeballing it. All right. So now I've capped both of those ends. All right, so now let's make this where it will actually sew instead of making a mess. Well, I want my puff last. So I need my walk to hold down the puff. I'm going to cap the end. I'm going to finish holding down the puff, cap that end, and then sew this thing. But I want it to start over here because we don't need a trim. So how do I move that? Well, I'm going to move my start point there and end it wherever. Cool. So that now, if I go to sew it, oh, I don't need that center walk, but it's not going to hurt it, so I'm going to leave it. No, we are not barking right now. I'm sorry. My dog has decided it's playtime. Sorry about that. All right, so now that I have I've got this digitized for puff, have the ends capped. That's cool, but you said you also wanted a border. So if you select on that lettering, hold the shift key down and click on that center walk. What that will do is it'll add a border around everything there. All right. We don't want that border to sew second. We want it to sew first. And I'm going to give it a different color there. Okay. So now I'll have a border. I did it 40. I would also probably want it to hang out a little bit more. So I can go into the properties under single line, say custom, and let's say 60, apply. So 60% out, 40% in, poof. So now I've got an outline around my text. So it's going to sew that and then that. Okay, so that's just taking a true type font and working with it to make it puff ready, if you will. Okay, so chew on this, not that. He thinks he's 6 months today and not 7 years. All right, so whenever you're working with puff, the keys that you got to focus on is making sure everything is appropriately capped. And meaning you don't have any straight edges like this with no needle penetrations. You have to have needle penetrations all the way around your shape. Otherwise, you're going to end up with areas of your puff not cut. So if your letter has a straight edge there, you have to deal with it. Whether that's going to be pinching it so that your stitches kind of go like this. And once it comes to here, then you start twisting the stitches around. That's where you're pinching it. Or you do what I did on these and you cap the ends, right? So these are caps, okay? So it's pretty much that simple. You have to think about each thing you're going to digitize and go accordingly. Like on this guy, again, it's just planning it out so you have needle penetrations all the way around, right? So if I were to redraw this, let's just do the puff side. You can see everywhere it's either pinching down so that you have needle penetrations all the way around to be able to cut the puff. Okay. We have another question typed in. How do I get better coverage? My density is 4.3 with a double zigzag underlay. Well, okay, 4.3, it depends on the size thread you're using. That's a little high, in my opinion. Thread is what, 3.7 points is the thickness of thread. So if you're doing it 4.3, that means you're leaving space between your 3.7 and 3.7. There's going to be a gap there. So lowering your density is going to be the key there. So if I take a column and I'll zoom in on it, density is literally the distance from this stitch to this stitch here, right? So if I measure from there to there, if this is set in points, so if I have 4, the distance from that stitch to that stitch is 4 points. Well, this thread is roughly 3.7-ish. 3.8. So if I have it set to 4, that means I got a 0.2 gap, 0.2 to 0.3 gap between it. So if you're at 4.3, that means you're going to have a 0.6 gap between those two stitches. So if you decrease it, it's going to bring the stitches closer together. So the higher the density, the further apart. So 8, that stitch to that stitch, if I measure from here to here, is 8 points. If I go excessively small, which I don't recommend, now you see everything's overlapping, so you get more coverage. So what is the right answer? 4 is pretty standard. Most people like that. I tend to go closer to 3.7 to 3.8. That's my personal preference on density. And so that's always what I use. So Sherry, does that help any? Okay. All right, so we looked at digitizing a letter that wasn't there. You want to know how to digitize a JPEG or a PNG. So we have some, if you haven't gone through the digitizing videos that are on, they're on YouTube, they're on Melco University, they're all over the place. There's links. They all take you to the same things. But there's some really nice videos that were put together on how to digitize. But basically, when you're working with artwork, you're going to go open whatever artwork it is you want to do, right? Good morning from Texas. Hey, thanks for joining. All right, so let's see. On my PC, see designs, graphics. I'm going to open Earth Day. Okay, so first step is you're going to open whatever JPEG or art you want. Your second step is going to be scale it to the size that you want it to be, because you're going to make different digitizing decisions depending on how big or how small you want it to be, right? So if you're trying to design something as a left chest, 3 inches, you might use more satin stitches and running stitches for fine detail. Whereas if you're doing it on a 12-inch, 12 or 13-inch jacket back, you're going to end up choosing more fills and things like that. So it's just, you want to scale it. So select your art down here. You can say, okay, I want that to be 3 inches. All right. So from there, now it's, you just kind of work through the puzzle to digitize it. So I always suggest working from your background to your foreground, right? So you're working forward, right? So, I can do the sky. So digitize my sky. I'm going way too fast, so not tracing very nicely. Give it a start, a stop. Okay, so I've got a sky. And then I can do my mountains and then the water, right? So after I do the different mountain things, coming back to forward, then do the water, then it's time to do my details of the trees, the sun, and then all the black outlines. So when you're working with your art, it's really about I look at them like little puzzles. How do I want to work my way through it? This one, if I go, hang on, let me go grab something. It's over here. Oh, that hurt Rio. Yeah. I just like to pull this up because rather than me digitizing and clicking around 100 ways, you can see it's the black stuff. When I say it's a puzzle, this is what I mean by that. You kind of have to think your way through it. So if I'm starting, let's turn that on. So if I'm going to start where this green circle is, all this black stuff is connected, right? So there's no reason I can't work my way through it without a trim. So I can do, a column stitch. So these guys right here to create a satin stitch that goes across here. And then I can do a running stitch, which is my walk normal, to move over, so that then I can go up and over with a satin stitch for this guy here. Then I can walk down, again using my walk tool, just as a travel. I know it's going to get covered over later. And then do my satin column stitches over and across. Walk down, again do a satin stitch across, walk over, satin here, walk, and work your way all the way around so that your very last step is going to be a satin stitch circle around. Okay, so that's what I mean by thinking of it as a puzzle, of working your way through it to create it so that you can create it with no trims. because that's going to be the most efficient, your most efficient way through the design, right? If you can minimize trims, I know some people ask me, does it really matter if I have 5 less trims in a design? Well, if you're sewing one, no, cut it 5 more times and you're good. But if you can save a minute off your sew time, okay, again, if you're sewing one, it's almost a who cares, right? But if you are sewing a production run and you have 1,000 items to do, 1 minute saved, that's 1,000 minutes. Now that's time and money that you're saving. So kind of getting into those good practices of optimizing your flow through it really can help save you time and money down the line when you're doing things. So it's always a good, especially as you're getting started and learning that to work through the digitizing most efficiently is a good habit to get into, because that way you don't have to retrain yourself when you're going, oh my goodness, I'm now, I've gone from doing 5 shirts, which was fun, that was cool, but now I'm doing orders of 500. And man, it'd be cool if I could finish this sooner, or, ABC, I want to make more money. Cool. So learning those things up front, it's a good habit to get into. Okay. All right, we got you a link to the conversion assistant, so if you want to look into that, that's always fun. There's the links I was looking for were actually the ones on, they're the digitizing videos, so they're the ones that show you how to import graphics and all of that. I'll get you a link for those later unless they appear. All right, let's see, what other questions? Did you guys have any others? Because I think those were the only questions I had sent in ahead of time. Yeah, so how to do puff and basic digitizing. Let me see if I can find those other videos real quick for you. Let's see. There they are. So all I did was went to playlists and then digitizing basics. No, please don't play. All of these are really good step-by-steps of learning how to digitize, of how to click the buttons. Okay, so that's your first step, is learning how to use all the tools, and then after you do that, it really comes down to practice. Some of the first things I always used to do was when I was sending designs out, when I got them back, let's say I had a design that sewed beautifully. It was just, all right, 1 minute, let me get rid of him. Go, I'm done. Sorry, I kicked him out. I would take a design that I sent out and it was really pretty, and I digitized it and it ran really well. And I would recreate it. So go through and digitize it, clicking through the tool. Is it a waste of time? Somewhat, right? Because I already finished the job. But it was a way for me to remove that puzzle element of how do I get through a design? How do I work from point A to point B and see how, see different examples of how it's done and work through it in my tool in DesignShop to be able to get it done efficiently. So it was a good learning tool, not something that's a whole, to some degree it is a waste of time, but I found it very, very useful of learning. Can I show how to shade something like a roll of toilet paper that is partway open? I don't even know where to go with that. Okay, shading. Now, I need a picture. Toilet paper clip art? I don't know what to search for. Toilet paper clip art. Oh! Let's see. I don't even know. I doubt that's what you want. I'm looking for something as reference of what I'm... of course. Oh, there we go. Copy. DesignShop. New. Paste. Okay. Let's see. All right, so let's just look at this. I'm not gonna draw. We're just gonna look at that part of the paper. All right, so start, oops, I don't have any holes. Backspace, enter, give it a start point, a stop point, and a stitch direction. All right, let's see. There we go. Okay, so let's call that white, right? And now we want to add kind of a gray shading in there. So different ways you can do it is, I like to copy and paste on top of it. And let's say we want, that one had a pretty straight hard line on it. So I'm going to go here, insert a curved splice, and let's say that's where my shade line is. I'm just making stuff up now, but all right. So I'm going to take, oops, cancel that. I'm going to take this, go to operations and break object, delete this side. Okay, so that's not what we want. We don't want a hard line like that, right? So let's say you want to then take this, go into its properties, and there's a bunch of different ways we can do it. First off, it's going on top of something else, so we don't need all this fill or all this underlay, right? And the other one is, how do you want that shading to look? Do you want it to be straight? So let's say you just kind of want to add some gray on there. Well, if that's all you want, you can kind of up your density, and that will add that effect in there, right? So it's easier to see when you sew it out, or if you have it and, oh, come back. There we go. Zoom out. All right, so I can add a shade that way. Well, what if you want it to go a little more dynamic or have some random edges to it, you can add that going one way or another, and I always guess wrong. So you can make the edge a little softer, or so that's a random edge, that would be one. Let's say you didn't want it to be an even shade, you want it darker one way or another, you can use custom density, right? So custom density allows you to choose, you notice how the stitching here is wider apart than in there, right? So it's getting denser in the middle versus the outside. Well, you can play with that, right? So I can say, okay, convex. So it's lighter in the center, darker up top. I can reverse that. So now it's going to be darker in the middle, lighter on top. You can add points to this and drag it around. When doing that, I always like to turn on auto apply. So I can, as I move stuff, I can see how it's affecting everything, right? So I can add points to this. But that's how I would do it, right? I would kind of look at how it is you want it to look to be able to do your shading. We did get you some links on how to shade fills. So another thing I always like to show with doing fills is down under your custom designs. Down here, there's some filled shaded things. So you can pull that in and study how the different shades are done. So that's just another one where you can look at its properties so that you can kind of mimic that. So Sherry, did that help any? Hopefully. Can you show how to overlap applique designs, remove the hidden blanket stitch under the lower design? Okay, so let me get rid of this. Go away. No, I don't want that either. I don't want that either. Just deleting things. All right. Okay, so we've got applique designs. So why don't I just go like, nope, that's not applique tool. That is the applique tool. All right, so I'm going to put a circle, and I'm just making two things overlap. Okay, so I got two overlapping applique designs. And I assume what you're wanting is to get rid of this stuff underneath there, right? So first off, this is not exactly how I like to do my appliques, but all right, I'm gonna go change them. Go into properties, enable color change after tack down, and I don't like them that close, so let's do 50-50. Yeah, I like that better. Okay, I'm gonna copy the properties from that one, paste them over here. That makes me happier. Okay. All right, so now what I'm going to do is take these guys and convert them from applique to wireframe. Oops, come back. Operations, convert to wireframe. Now, these are still applique designs. It's just now in pieces. Okay, so I can rearrange this all if I want, but really all I need to do is remove that satin stitch underneath there, right? So if I select it, I can add a point here and here. Notice this is a circle, so whenever you split a circle, it's gonna move points around, and I don't want to move it near where the actual shape is that I want, so I just added a point in the middle, so I can do that. Now when you see what I mean, it kind of splits it. But now I can take this, zoom in, and delete those points, if I can select them. There you go. So delete that one, and same with this guy. Delete that point. Cool. So I'm going to start there and there. I don't want that one either. All right, so I removed the satin stitches. The zigzag, if I'm going to leave the applique shape there, then I need to leave that zigzag to hold it down. But what if I, rather than doing that, I can take this guy, again, add points here, and just modify it and drag it over. Right, so let's say you don't need all that extra fabric. So you can modify it. But that's all I would do, is kind of move your shape around. Yeah. So that's cool. There you go. Okay. Let's see. But yeah, and that way you can remove the satin stitch that'll leave like a bump underneath there and get it out of the way. So Elaine, did that help any? And from Arkansas, do I have any videos on how to embroider hats from setting up the attachment to loading the hat on the machine? Yes, I'm fairly certain there are videos on that on YouTube. Can I find them, or will someone else beat me to it? Let's see. Let's see if I can find it for you. Hat. Oops, I don't think I'm searching Melco. Of course not. How do I search Melco? There it is. Hat. Oh, all right, they beat me. Cap embroidery. So there's a whole bunch. First time embroidering hats. So there's a bunch of them here. And then we got in the comments, we've got a link to the cap driver installation, which also has linked to different videos. And so here you've got video installations as well as settings, all kinds of fun stuff. Okay, so we got those for you in the comments. But here, just for fun, so you saw how I did it, if you go to the Melco page and on this thing, scroll over to the little searchy bar, that will search this page. And there's a bunch of hat videos to check out. Okay, and we got you another link in the comments for cap hooping videos. So yeah, there's a lot of resources available on hats. I don't know, hats seem magical to a lot of people. I find them really easy. So every time I think it's just a matter of doing it. So, once you get the hang of how to hoop it, how to set it up, they just go. It's just boop, 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 go, go, go. It's fun. I just finished, how many was that? A few hundred order. So anyhow, yeah. Oh, so you use Elaine was saying she usually uses an E-stitch or E-stitch. So there you go. So an E-stitch rather than a satin, same difference. Although if I was using an E-stitch, I would change the start and stop to be the other way, so it goes to the opposite side, or I'd move it around. Anyway, all right, what other questions do we have? Let me quick scroll and see if I missed any. Okay, we talked about density, conversion assistant, we got shading, applique overlaps, hats. Cool. All right, what other questions can we help with? Any special settings for lettering on beanies? So beanies are interesting because we're getting into that season. We're getting into the cold season and Christmas season. So knits in general, they move, right? So depending on what you're sewing, a lot of times using a primer stitch is really helpful, because it ties it all down so that when your lettering goes on, you're not worrying about that knit stretching and moving around a lot. Okay, so what I would do is use all your good practices on the lettering itself. This is kind of tiny, but that's okay. And then good settings being use underlay. If you don't know what to use, auto works really well. You can tell I use it a lot. Density, again, auto density works really well. If you've got a number you like, that's cool, but quite frankly, I use auto underlay and auto density because I like it. Compensation, I would suggest 1 to 2 points of offset on pretty much anything. And then you go, if you want to add that primer stitch object, generate primer, and decide how far away you want it to be. It doesn't, because it's going on a beanie material, you don't need to make it super large. Whereas if it were going on a stocking with fur, the fur will eat your lettering, so you want it to be a little larger there. So maybe just 20 points away, I don't know, look at it and see what works for you. But then what you would do with this is whatever color your beanie is, that's the color thread you would use for that primer stitch. And all that's going to do is give you a foundation for when your lettering goes on to so that it's not falling into the knits. It's not stretching it all over the place. It's holding still so your customers can't stretch the daylights out of it and break your lettering, things like that. All right, Mason, how do you do puff settings when it's non-lettering? So we've got a nice document on the FAQ that talks about puff settings in general, but your puff settings are going to be, the same. You're still going to have to cap the ends, right? So if I want this to be lettering or to be a puff design, I would come into its properties and I could still apply this thing to it, and it, puff alphabet selection, and it will apply all the puff settings to this. So you can do that, but keep in mind, just like with lettering, I still have these ends that I have to cap. Now, if you want to do them by hand, that's cool too. You can turn all this off, and you can see, you can set the density to be anywhere from 1.8 to 2.0 would be your density for puff. And then underlay, you either digitize it yourself or use a center walk. I would highly recommend digitizing it yourself. That way you can control how it's holding everything down. And it's not overly crushing your puff. That would be my suggestion. But you can use a center walk if you want. And what that will do is, you see it does a center walk and then it comes over it. I personally don't like it that way, but it works. It holds it down. But yeah, that puff alphabet thing is intended to be, just to be clear, that style. So when I come over here, puff alphabets, I always say selection rather than the whole design, because not often is the whole design going to be all puff. Well, I guess that's not always true. Anyway, that is intended to be used with the puff fonts that are built into the software. These guys right here. You can use them for other things. It just applies the, nice settings that work well with puff to the element that you have selected. Now, after that, you still have to make sure it's digitized appropriately for puff. This column right here, it will not sew as puff because it'll cut the puff all along here and all along here, but these ends have no needle penetration, so my puff's gonna be hanging out there and not looking too pretty. So you're gonna either have to cap it or you're gonna have to do something underneath, like what we started off the day with. Okay. And we did get you a link to the puff settings article I'll show it to you here, which goes through settings all over the place. So if you've never done puff, there's also a nice PDF down here that has tips, and then there's also some sample designs. So there's a lot of resources out there on how to different videos, digitizing it, sewing it, all kinds of stuff. All right. What other questions do we have? All right. I don't see any other questions coming in. Well, thank you guys for joining me today. We will be back next week. I had to move it to today. I got to go fix the machine tomorrow, so I got to travel. But I will be back next week again on Thursday, and then hopefully we'll be going back to Thursday, Friday thing after that. So let us know what you want to learn about, and you'll see my little title page show up on Facebook in some of the groups. When you see this little picture, it's usually me asking for questions. So if you have stuff ahead of time, that way I can prep some examples. That's helpful. But just, let us know what you want to learn, and we will do our best to help you out. So you guys have a fantastic weekend, and I will talk to you next week. Bye, everyone.